There's a moment that no one prepares you for. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with sirens or diagnoses. It's the quiet moment you realize. Stepping down the stairs feels different now. That your legs, once strong, steady, unquestioned, now ask permission. That you pause at the top, not out of fear, but out of unfamiliar hesitation. No one tells you how strange that feels. You still look like you still smile, still walk, but deep inside something shifts. And it's not just the legs, it's what they represent: independence, confidence, the right to move through the world freely. So when that starts to fade, even just a little, it doesn't just affect your body. It affects your sense of self. And maybe you haven't said it out loud. Maybe you brush it off, blame the weather, the shoes, the long day, but you know your body is whispering something. And if you don't listen now, the whispers become echoes. Tonight, I want to invite you not to fight your body, but to meet it, gently, quietly, intentionally. Because strength isn't loud, and it doesn't always look like effort. Sometimes it starts in stillness. And in the next few breaths, I'll show you how. Helen didn't notice it at first, not during the errands, not while folding laundry, not even during her evening walks. It was only when she stood at the top of the stairs one night and didn't move. Her body hesitated. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was something softer but deeper. A flicker of doubt in her own legs, and that flicker was new. She looked down at her feet, then at the handrail. She didn't reach for it, not yet, but she thought about it. And that thought, that quiet pause, was the moment something shifted inside her. She was 68. A widow, a woman who'd once taught yoga to full classes every week. Her body had always been her ally, her instrument, her language, and now it felt like a foreign accent. One she almost understood, but not quite. That night, Helen didn't sleep well. She wasn't in pain, but her breath was shallow, her chest tight, not from illness, from uncertainty. She couldn't name it, but it lingered. And the next morning, when she sat on the edge of her bed and tried to stand, she noticed. Her legs felt disconnected, like she had to tell them what to do. Like strength had become optional. Helen didn't talk about it. Who would she tell? Her daughter had her own life, her own rushing rhythm, her friends. Well, they joked about aging, but no one really said these things out loud. So Helen kept it to herself, until one night 3 weeks later, she woke up gasping. Her calf was cramping so hard it curled her foot. She rolled over, rubbed it, breathed through it. And as the muscles softened, a thought landed in her chest like a truth she could no longer ignore. This is only going to get worse if I keep pretending it's not happening. She sat in silence, dark room, warm sheets, and the pulse of reality pulsing in her thighs. She wasn't broken, she wasn't failing, but she was being spoken to by her own body. And finally, she was ready to listen, not with fear, not with resistance, but with a quiet kind of reverence. Because the body remembers how to rebuild, it only needs the right kind of attention. And the journey back doesn't start in gyms or clinics. It starts here, in this kind of stillness, where legs aren't pushed, but invited. Where strength isn't forced, but reawakened. Where aging isn't the end of movement, but the beginning of a deeper, quieter kind. And Helen, she was just beginning. Helen had always believed strength was built by doing more steps, more reps, more effort. She remembered her younger years, teaching classes back to back, carrying groceries up flights of stairs, rushing through full days without even thinking about fatigue. Back then, her body responded instantly. Soreness would fade overnight. Energy bounced back within hours. One missed stretch didn't matter. But now her body followed a different clock, a slower, wiser rhythm. It wasn't about bouncing back. It was about returning with patience, with rhythm, with care. The old rules: push harder, go longer, ignore pain, no longer applied. In fact, they had become counterproductive. Her knees no longer tolerated pounding. Her hips needed coaxing, not commands. Her muscles needed space, not stress. And most importantly, her nervous system, the silent conductor of every muscle, joint, breath, no longer responded well to noise. It wanted calm. It needed stillness. The same routines that once built strength in her 30s now only built tension. And so, Helen had to learn a new kind of strength. The kind that comes from listening. The kind that honors limits without becoming limited. Strength after 60 is a different kind of story. It's not about chasing youth. It's about building something deeper. Not just the ability to lift or walk, but the power to rise from a chair without wobble, to reach the top shelf without hesitation. To feel your body respond, not reluctantly but steadily. This kind of strength requires different ingredients: repetition, not intensity; alignment, not force; recovery, not hustle. Helen started to see her body like a garden, and gardens don't grow faster when you pull on the stems. They grow with rhythm, with water, with rest, with sun. And with trust. So each evening she stopped asking, "Did I do enough?" and began asking instead, "Did I restore what was depleted?" Because in her 60s, the goal was no longer to outperform. It was to reconnect, to rebuild from the inside out. And as she embraced this shift, her body softened, her joints opened. And her legs, once hesitant, began to trust her again, not through louder commands, but through quieter rituals. Because sometimes, the most powerful strength is the one that arrives without noise, just a steady presence, unshakable, real, and rooted like her. If you've ever felt your body slowing, not failing, just shifting, let that be a message, not a punishment. Let that be the invitation. Because the second half of life doesn't need to be smaller, it just needs to be wiser. And strength, real strength, listens first. Then it moves. It was a Thursday night, rain tapping on the window, a cup of chamomile on the nightstand. The kind of quiet that wraps the house in a soft hush. Helen had just drifted into sleep when something grabbed her calf like a fist. She bolted upright. The pain was sharp, sudden. Her foot curled involuntarily, toes clenched, breath shallow. It took her a moment to even understand what was happening. Then she remembered. A cramp. A deep, twisting one, the kind she used to hear her mother complain about but never truly understood until now. She slid her hand down her leg, trying to massage it out. The muscle was tight, almost angry. She winced, breathed, pressed gently. Eventually, the grip softened. The pain didn't vanish, but it retreated enough for her to sit back and breathe. And that's when the deeper ache arrived. Not in the leg, in her chest, the ache of realization. That this was no longer just about a random spasm. This was a sign. Her body was tired. Not from doing too much, but from not being listened to. From being treated like it was still 35. From being rushed through days, skipped through meals, dropped into bed without a proper end. That night, Helen didn't go back to sleep for hours. She lay on her back, eyes open, hearing the rain again. But this time, it wasn't soothing. It felt like a message. A slow, steady tapping. Are you paying attention now? And she was, fully, because no alarm clock could have delivered what that cramp did. It wasn't just pain, it was truth. And truth, when it arrives through the body, is impossible to ignore. She thought about how she used to stretch every night without fail. How she used to end her day with breathwork, magnesium tea, soft music. How slowly all of that had faded, replaced by late dinners, phone scrolling, falling asleep to the hum of background noise. Her routines had unraveled, and her body had followed. But lying there in the dark, Helen felt something stir, not panic, permission to begin again. Not with resolutions, not with pressure, but with something smaller, softer. She sat up, lit a candle, and whispered a sentence she hadn't spoken in years. I want to feel strong again. Not like she did at 30, but strong for where she was now, steady, clear, capable. That night, something shifted, not the pain, but the posture of her mind. She wasn't trying to fix herself anymore. She was learning to reclaim. And in that silent, sacred moment, her healing began, not because the cramp was gone, but because her awareness had returned. And awareness is where strength begins. Helen didn't go looking for a program. She didn't need a new machine, a gym membership, or a set of rules to follow. What she needed was a rhythm, something gentle, something real, something she could return to every night without pressure. That's when she discovered the power of 3 quiet things, not pills, not routines copied from influencers or fitness ads, but 3 small vitamins that don't come in bottles, yet feed the body just the same: magnesium. Movement, mindset, each one simple, each one powerful, and together, transformational. The first was magnesium, not some fancy blend, just a basic mineral her body had been quietly begging for. Helen had read that magnesium supports over 300 functions in the body, but what struck her most was this: it helps muscles relax. Not just let go, but truly release, the kind of release that says, you're safe now. She started taking it every evening, not obsessively, not perfectly, just consistently, a warm tea with a magnesium blend, Within a week, the cramps faded, her sleep deepened, and the tightness in her legs felt less clenched. It was like her body finally got the signal. We're not in survival mode anymore. The second vitamin was movement, but not the kind that wears you out, not exercise for achievement. This was movement for connection, 5 minutes, 10 if she had more space, just enough to say, "I see you, legs, I remember you." She'd stand near the bed, roll her ankles slowly, bend her knees with a soft exhale. Stretch her calves against the wall, no music blasting, no timer, just breath and presence. And every time she moved with awareness, not urgency, her legs responded, not with burn, but with warmth. And the third vitamin, the one most people ignore but often matters most, mindset, what she told herself before sleep. Because Helen realized something profound, her body was listening to her thoughts. When she went to bed worrying, her jaw clenched, her belly tightened, her sleep stayed shallow. But when she spoke gently to herself, "I'm healing. My legs are recovering." Every breath brings ease. Her whole system softened. It wasn't magic, it was messaging. Biological, neurological, emotional messaging that turned tension into permission. The trifecta was never loud, never dramatic, but it worked. Night after night, magnesium told her body, "You can rest." Movement whispered, "You are alive." Mindset affirmed, "You are safe." And together, they created the conditions her strength had been waiting for. Not to be forced, but to be welcomed back. So if you've been looking for a way to begin, don't start with intensity. Start with these 3, magnesium, movement, mindset, 3 quiet invitations, 3 gentle truths, 3 steps, towards strength that doesn't shout but stays. Helen used to think that movement had to mean effort, sweat, counted reps. A stopwatch ticking nearby, but what she began to realize was something far more liberating. Movement that heals looks different after 60. It's not about burning calories or chasing goals or feeling the burn. It's about presence, precision, permission, and it begins with the question, what does my body need right now? For Helen, it started with one simple act, standing beside her bed, barefoot. She placed both feet flat on the floor, felt the ground, closed her eyes, and swayed just a little, not to stretch, not to train, just to feel where her weight lived. Most nights, her right hip held more, some nights her knees felt stiff. But every night, without fail, she moved with attention, not ambition, just attention. That's the secret. The body doesn't need to be pushed to get stronger. It needs to be reintroduced to itself. Helen began with small things, ankle circles, slow heel raises, gentle lunges holding the wall. Gliding her toes back and forth like writing her name on the carpet, 5 minutes. No pain, no rush, just quiet activation. She didn't call it exercise. She called it checking in, because that's what it was, a nightly reminder. These legs belong to me. And the more she moved them with care, the more they moved with confidence. The key wasn't volume. It was consistency. Doing less, every night was better than doing too much once a week. And Helen noticed something unexpected. Her legs felt warmer when she slipped into bed. She turned less during the night. She woke up, grounded, stronger not because she lifted more, but because she listened more. Her joints no longer cracked with surprise in the morning. Her steps no longer hesitated at the top of the stairs. This kind of movement didn't exhaust her. It returned her to herself. And that it was more powerful than any workout she'd ever known. So if you've been afraid to move because it might hurt, or because you think it won't help, let this truth land softly. Movement doesn't have to be big to be effective. It just has to be kind. Your body remembers every small signal. And when you move with gentleness, it doesn't resist. It welcomes you back, one step, one breath, one quiet night at a time. If that speaks to you, start tonight. Bare feet, soft light, 5 minutes, not to prove anything. Just to remind your legs and your heart that healing is still available. And movement is your invitation. Helen once believed thoughts were just thoughts, floating things, internal noise, background chatter that didn't mean much. But aging has a way of revealing which messages the body hears loudest. And one night, sitting in bed with the lamp off and silence thick around her, she realized something unsettling. She had spent years telling her body it was failing, not directly, but in the way she sighed when standing, in the way she muttered, "I'm getting old," under her breath. In the way she looked at her reflection with a mix of resignation and fatigue, and the body, always listening, had obeyed, not out of punishment, out of loyalty. The nervous system doesn't know sarcasm. It doesn't filter emotion from physiology. It simply responds. And for Helen, that meant tension in her thighs, tightness in her calves. A subtle bracing, night after night, that blocked her ability to truly rest. That night, she decided to try something she once thought silly: affirmations, not the loud kind, not the ones you repeat 10 times in front of a mirror. Just a single whisper, timed with breath just before sleep. My body is still strong. And the next night, I trust my legs are healing. And another night, every cell in me knows how to repair. At first, it felt strange, the words stuck in her throat, her logical mind rolled its eyes, but something deeper softened. Her pulse slowed, her shoulders dropped, her jaw unclenched. It wasn't about magic, it was about chemistry. Because when you speak calm, your body receives calm. And in that stillness, real strength grows. Helen learned that the mind isn't just a passenger. It's the compass, the conductor, the quiet leader whispering instructions into the very tissues of your being. So she made it part of her bedtime ritual, after stretching, after magnesium. Just as her head touched the pillow, one sentence, one truth spoken softly, and then breath, a steady inhale, a longer exhale, eyes closed, no screens, no scrolling, just her body, her breath, and her belief that healing happens when the mind gives permission. Because it does. The legs don't just respond to movement, they respond to mindset. And mindset, when repeated with care, becomes memory, a muscle of its own, invisible but undeniable. So if you've been carrying quiet doubts, whispers like, "I'm too late," or "this won't work for me," pause, replace them. Even if you don't fully believe it yet, say instead, "My strength is returning." Say, "I am not finished." Say, "This body is still listening." And then rest. Because rest, with the right thoughts beside it, becomes medicine. And thoughts, when chosen well, become the first movement of recovery, unseen, but deeply felt. Most people think training happens in the gym, on the yoga mat, during the walk, in the doing, but Helen had come to learn a quieter truth. The real training, the deepest transformation, happens after, in the silence, in the dark, while the world sleeps. That's when recovery begins. And after 60, recovery isn't a luxury, it's essential. Because the body no longer bounces back from strain. It rebuilds slowly, layer by layer, and only if we give it the conditions to do so. Helen started noticing it after a few weeks of evening rituals. A difference in the way her legs felt when she woke, no tightness, no dragging fatigue, just readiness. It didn't come from doing more, it came from recovering smarter. She began protecting her nighttime hours like sacred ground. Dinner was earlier, screens off by 9. The bedroom cool, dim, and quiet. She swapped dramatic TV for soft instrumental music, traded late-night snacks for herbal tea. And as she slowed the world down, her body sped up its repair. Because here's the science most people don't talk about. During deep sleep, the body releases growth hormone. It repairs tissue. It reduces inflammation. It restores energy at the cellular level. But this only happens if you actually enter deep sleep. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. Helen began thinking of her evening not as winding down, but as setting up her next day, not with a to-do list, but with care. Because if her nervous system was calm, her muscles could relax. Her joints could decompress, her breath could deepen. And in that stillness, true rebuilding began. Some nights she simply lay on her back, legs elevated with a pillow, hands on her belly, breathing, no thinking, no fixing, just being. It looked like nothing. But inside, it was everything. Circulation improved, inflammation dropped, digestion calmed. And most of all, her trust returned. Trust in her body's timing and her body's knowing, in her ability to create safety from the inside out. Recovery was no longer passive, it was a practice. And like all practices, it responded to rhythm, so she stayed consistent, not perfectly, but faithfully. And her body, slowly, graciously, responded in kind. The tightness softened, the fatigue lessened, the strength returned, not with drama, not overnight, but through layers, quiet layers, built one evening at a time. If you've ever wondered why your body doesn't feel restored, even after sleep, this may be why, not because you're broken, but because your evening hasn't yet become a ritual, so start small. Dim the lights, turn off the noise, elevate your legs, take 3 deep breaths with your hand on your chest. Tell your nervous system, we are safe. Because once it believes you, your body begins its true training. And in that unseen space where nothing moves, yet everything repairs, you are becoming strong again. Helen didn't overhaul her life. She didn't need to. The shift came in moments. Quiet, almost invisible ones, 5 minutes in the evening, 3 gentle actions, a tiny decision repeated daily. That's how strength returned, not from a grand plan, not from a strict program, but from ritual, because a ritual is more than a routine. A routine is something you do. A ritual is something you mean. Helen chose her 3. First, she lit the same candle each night, not for scent, but for signal. It told her body we're ending now. Next, she stretched just 3 movements. Hamstring reach, calf lean, ankle roll, nothing fancy, no timer, just her breath and her body. And last, she spoke. 1 sentence, soft, honest. Thank you, legs, I know you're healing. Some nights she whispered it, some nights she mouthed it, but every night she meant it, and meaning makes all the difference. Because when something is done with presence, it leaves a deeper mark. It carves a new groove in the body, in the mind, in the pattern of healing. 3 weeks passed. Helen didn't notice a miracle. She noticed a morning, a small moment. She stood from a low chair without using her hands. No wobble, no push, no breath held in, just lift. Simple, natural, and her eyes filled. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was proof. Proof that quiet care matters, that the body remembers who it was. When you remind it gently enough, she didn't tell anyone, didn't post about it, didn't mark it on a calendar. She simply lit her candle that night, the same as every night, stretched, breathed, whispered her sentence, and went to sleep with a quiet kind of pride, because the small things, done often, change everything. You don't need a full routine to begin. You don't need the perfect plan. You just need meaningful repetition, something that says, I'm still showing up for myself. So pick your 3. They don't have to match Helen's. Maybe it's a warm cloth on your knees, a single page of a book you love, a minute of stillness with your eyes closed, whatever they are. Make them sacred, make them yours, and return to them, night after night, not because they're perfect, but because they're yours. That's how the body learns, that's how the legs remember. And that's how strength, real, lasting, quiet strength, begins to live in you again. 90 days had passed, not marked by milestones, not tracked by charts, but by feeling. By the way Helen moved through her mornings, by how she stood up without bracing, how she reached the top of the stairs without hesitation, how she walked to the mailbox without needing to pause halfway. There was no applause, no celebration, but inside her chest, a quiet victory echoed, not loud, but certain, because what she built wasn't sudden. It was layered, like sediment in a riverbed, each night of care laying down another soft foundation, invisible at first, but over time, solid. That's what resilience truly is, not the ability to push harder, but the capacity to come back again and again with gentleness. Helen began to feel her strength not in moments of exertion, but in absence. The absence of fear when she stood, the absence of tightness in the morning, the absence of dread before the stairs. It didn't come with speed. It came with stability, rooted, reliable. Her legs no longer felt like strangers. They belonged to her again, listened to her again, trusted her again, and the trust was mutual. Because every stretch, every breath, every whisper built something deeper than muscle. It built relationship between body and mind, between intention and action. She no longer needed reminders to do her rituals. They became her rhythm, a nightly descent into stillness that rose each morning as steadiness. There was a moment, brief but unforgettable. Her daughter visited, brought her granddaughter, full of joy and movement. And when the little one dropped a toy under the couch, Helen knelt down to reach it. No wince, no brace, no second thought, she just moved. And as she handed it back up, her daughter paused, eyes wide but silent. Helen smiled, not because she needed approval, but because she recognized what that look meant. She was being seen, not as fragile, but as strong again, not in a youthful way, but in a seasoned, rooted, dependable way, the kind of strength that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It just is. If you're waiting for a sign that what you're doing matters, let this be it. Healing doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself in the quiet things. A steady step, a longer walk, a forgotten ache. That's how you know you've been building something real, something no one else can see, but everyone else can feel when you walk in, when you stand tall, when you move without apology. Because you are no longer trying to get back to who you were. You are becoming who you were meant to be now, layer by layer, evening by evening, breath by breath. Each night is a doorway, not just to sleep, but to something deeper, a place where the body listens and the mind gives instruction. Helen came to understand this in her bones. That her last thoughts before sleep weren't just quiet reflections, they were signals. Sent down through her nervous system, into her breath, into her joints, into the deep rhythm of restoration. And so each night, as she dimmed the lights, as she settled into stillness, she chose her words carefully, not out of superstition, but because she knew they carried weight. I am safe. I am healing. My legs are remembering who they are. No one else heard them, but her body did, because the subconscious is most open in the softness before sleep, not during the day when everything is noise and motion, but in the hush just before surrender. That's when beliefs root. That's when biology aligns with mindset. And that's when Helen trained the deepest parts of herself, not with muscle, but with message. Magnesium calmed her cells, movement opened her limbs, mindset shaped her chemistry, the 3 quiet vitamins, simple, accessible, powerful. She didn't need more time, she needed more intention. And so do we, the truth is. You don't have to wait for things to get worse, you don't need a diagnosis, you don't need a scare, you just need a signal. This can be that signal. Tonight, as you lie down, your body will listen. And you have the choice to whisper what you want it to become. Don't waste that moment. Don't fill it with regret or replay or criticism, fill it with care. A breath that says, I'm still here. A stretch that says, I still believe. A thought that says, we begin again. Because every night is a fresh invitation to grow stronger, to feel steadier, to live more deeply into the version of yourself that still wants to rise. So let your body hear you. Let it know you're not giving up, you're tuning in. And when the morning comes, you won't just wake. You'll rise with legs that remember, with breath that leads, with quiet strength that never left, only waited for you to return. One night, one signal, that's all it takes. Your legs are listening, so speak to them like they matter, because they do.